Ms. Sinema.
Mr. Chair, I rise in opposition to SB 1070 as amended. I just want to point out some of the concerns with this bill and some of the constitutional issues. I've mentioned these at length in the MAPS committee 2 weeks ago. We spent about 3 hours discussing these concerns. The Biggs Amendment makes some amendments to the bill, but it doesn't address some of the core constitutional concerns, and many of the major problems with this legislation remain. For starters, the solicitation of work, whether it be full-time or as a day laborer, is protected speech under the First Amendment of the United States Constitution. Indeed, a number of courts, including here in Arizona, have struck down prior attempts to prevent the solicitation of work on First Amendment grounds. Targeting the acts of hiring a laborer or entering a card just appear to be other ways of prohibiting the solicitation of work. We already have laws that prevent the obstruction of traffic, and the language of this bill does not avoid constitutional problems encountered by other similar pieces of legislation. The bill tries to make a state crime out of failing to carry registration documents required under federal immigration law. In New Hampshire, an attempt to charge someone using a theory of trespassing for violating federal law was held to be unconstitutional under the Supremacy Clause of the United States Constitution. The court held that because Congress intended to occupy the field, this kind of state action was preempted. As such, this bill's action is also preempted. The United States Constitution reserves for the federal government the exclusive power to regulate immigration in this country. Like it or not, states may not legislate that authority for themselves. Taken alone or in combination with other measures passed by this legislature, this bill goes well beyond the New Hampshire law and is a direct attempt to regulate immigration in this country. This legislation will invite more litigation. The lawsuits that will follow challenging the constitutionality of this bill will come at an enormous cost to the taxpayers of Arizona at a time when they can least afford it, which prompts me to mention a number of additional problems with the bill. SB 1070 is a massive unfunded mandate for counties, cities, and towns. This bill requires even departments without 287G agreements to investigate and enforce all violations of federal law. The taxpayers have to carry and bear the burden of the costs for those training for those officers. Many officers have no training or experience in enforcing federal immigration law, and that raises concerns that the more U.S. citizens and lawful residents will be improperly investigated and detained. The bill also exposes our counties, cities, towns, and other political subdivisions to huge legal bills and penalties by allowing any person to sue if he or she believes that some policy or practice in any way limits the enforcement of immigration laws to less than the full extent permitted by federal law. This standard is vague, this standard is open-ended, it encourages meritless and politically motivated lawsuits, and it leaves local jurisdictions to foot the bill. In addition, the amendment added by Mr. Biggs does not protect local governments because although it says that attorney's fees will be awarded to the city or county if they win the lawsuit, this fails to take into consideration that some litigants may have no assets in which they would have no ability to pay the legal fees for those cities and those counties. At the same time, the bill imposes a one-size-fits-all approach that strips local law enforcement agencies of the current ability that they enjoy to set their own priorities when it comes to keeping communities safe. By dictating that even enforcement of administrative violations of federal immigration laws have priority, the bill actually threatens to increase crime and make our neighborhoods less safe. This legislation adds to the problem by jeopardizing any trust and cooperation that now exists between law enforcement and immigrant communities. And the bill makes it less likely that potential witnesses to violent crimes will come forward, which makes the job of law enforcement more difficult and diminishes the hope of crime victims that justice will be served. It is not an accident that the League of Cities and Towns, the Arizona Association of Chiefs and Police, the Arizona Catholic Conference, the Valley Interfaith Project, the City of Phoenix Police Department, the City of Mesa, Sierra Vista, Peoria, Yuma, Fountain Hills, the Arizona Prosecuting Attorneys Council, and the Arizona Coalition Against Domestic Violence, among many others, oppose this bill. This legislation is the wrong approach to illegal immigration, and I would encourage members to oppose this legislation. Finally, Mr. Chair and members, there are things that we can be doing to address illegal immigration in our state. Violence on our border is increasing at a rapid pace. The trafficking of drugs, the trafficking of guns, and the trafficking of humans for sex purposes is increasing.
30 seconds, Ms. Sinema.
And as this increases, this bill will do nothing to stop those problems. It will do nothing to address that increasing violence. What we need to do is continue down the road that some of us have been working on for several years, which is to give law enforcement and prosecuting agencies more tools to prosecute individuals who are engaging in criminal syndicate activity like drug running, gun running, and people running. Mr. Chair and members, I would encourage you to oppose this legislation as it has constitutional infirmities, major unfairness issues in the law, and does not address the real problems facing our state. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sinema.